quiet of a new home, the water's whisper hides a deadly secret. John Smith, 38, and his wife Mary, 35, had been saving for years to escape their cramped city apartment. Their 7-year-old son, Timmy, needed space to run and play, and the constant noise of traffic outside their old place kept them all awake at night. John taught history at a high school, and Mary worked long shifts as a nurse at the city hospital. The apartment was too small for their growing family, with Timmy's toys spilling out of his tiny room and no yard for him to explore. So, when they found an affordable house in the countryside, it felt like a dream come true. The house was old, built in the 1950s, with faded white paint and a sloped roof. It stood on a quiet plot of land near a small lake, about 15 minutes from the nearest town. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Linda, told them the house had been empty for 3 years. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had moved to a retirement home and left it behind. The price was surprisingly low, which made John and Mary cautious at first. They asked about repairs, plumbing, and the foundation, but Linda assured them everything was in decent shape. "It's a steal," she said, smiling. "Just needs a little love." On moving day, the June sun was bright and the air smelled of grass and wildflowers. John rented a moving truck and drove it carefully down the winding country road. Mary and Timmy followed in their blue sedan, Timmy bouncing in the back seat with excitement.
"Can I swim in the lake?"
he asked, pressing his face against the window. The lake was visible from the road, its surface calm and sparkling under the sunlight. Mary glanced at it, then at Timmy. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetie," she said. "We'll check it out together." The house was bigger than they'd imagined. It had 3 bedrooms upstairs, a living room with a brick fireplace, a kitchen with old wooden cabinets, and a basement with a concrete floor. The yard stretched out behind the house, sloping gently down to the lake's edge. Reeds grew along the shore, swaying in the breeze. John parked the truck in the gravel driveway and they started unloading boxes. Timmy carried his backpack, stuffed with toys, while John hauled the heavier boxes to the basement. The basement was dark, with a single small window letting in a sliver of light. It smelled musty, like damp wood and earth, but John didn't think much of it. Old houses had their quirks. Mary unpacked kitchen supplies while Timmy explored the yard. He found a pile of smooth stones near the lake and started tossing them into the water. Each stone made a soft plop, sending ripples across the surface. "Don't go too close," Mary called from the kitchen window. Timmy waved back, grinning. The lake looked peaceful, its water clear enough to see small fish darting near the shore. By afternoon, they were exhausted but happy. They sat on the living room floor, eating sandwiches Mary had made from what they'd brought in a cooler. The furniture was still covered with sheets, and boxes were stacked against the walls. "We'll paint this room blue," Mary said, looking at the faded wallpaper. John nodded. "Maybe green for the kitchen." Timmy, chewing on his sandwich, asked if he could have a treehouse. John laughed. "Let's get settled first, buddy." As the sun set, the house grew quiet. The lake's water lapped gently against the shore, a soft, rhythmic sound. They set up their beds, John and Mary in the main bedroom, Timmy in the smaller room next door. Timmy's room had a window facing the lake, and he spent a few minutes staring out before brushing his teeth. "It's so quiet here," he said, climbing into bed. Mary tucked him in, kissing his forehead. "That's why we moved here," she said. No more city noise. John and Mary went to bed around 10. The house felt cooler at night, and the silence was almost heavy. Mary lay awake for a while, listening to the lake's gentle waves. It was soothing, but something about it made her uneasy. She couldn't place why. Around 2 a.m. she woke up suddenly. A sound had pulled her from sleep. A faint, high-pitched cry like a child's sob. It seemed to come from outside, near the lake. She sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The sound stopped. The room was dark, and John was asleep beside her. She told herself it was just the wind or an animal. Maybe a bird. She lay back down, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, they ate breakfast at the kitchen table. John made coffee in their old machine, and Mary fried eggs. Timmy ate cereal, swinging his legs under the chair. "Did you hear anything last night?" Mary asked John, keeping her voice casual. He shook his head. "Slept like a rock, you?" She hesitated, then said, "Nothing. Just getting used to the quiet." Timmy didn't mention anything either. He was too busy talking about building a fort in the yard. After breakfast, they got to work. Mary dusted the shelves in the living room, sneezing as clouds of dust rose from the old wood. John fixed a creaky door hinge in the hallway, muttering about needing better tools. Timmy played in his room, setting up his action figures on the floor. The house was starting to feel like theirs, but Mary kept glancing out the window at the lake. In the morning light, it looked normal, blue and calm. Still, she felt a strange pull, like the water was watching her back. By lunchtime, they were making progress. Mary unpacked their clothes, folding them into the dresser. John carried more boxes to the basement, noticing the damp smell again. He checked the walls for leaks but found nothing. The small window down there was cloudy with grime, and he made a mental note to clean it later. Outside, Timmy ran through the grass, chasing a grasshopper. The day passed slowly, filled with small tasks and the hum of a new routine. As evening came, they grilled hot dogs in the yard. The air was warm, and fireflies blinked in the dusk. Timmy laughed as he caught one in his hands, letting it go after a moment. John and Mary sat on folding chairs, sipping lemonade. The lake was still, reflecting the orange sky. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But as they went inside to clean up, Mary noticed something odd. The kitchen floor had a small wet spot near the sink, like someone had spilled water. She wiped it up, frowning. The sink wasn't leaking, and no one had been near it. That night, as they went to bed, Mary looked out their bedroom window. The lake was dark now, almost black, its surface like a sheet of glass. She closed the curtain and got into bed, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that lingered in her chest. The first week in the new house passed slowly for the Smith family. John, Mary, and Timmy were still adjusting to the quiet of the countryside. The city had been loud, car horns, sirens, neighbors shouting, but here the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the soft lapping of the lake against the shore. It was peaceful, but Mary couldn't shake the uneasy feeling from that first night. The crying sound she'd heard lingered in her mind, though she told herself it was nothing. On Monday morning, John went back to work. His school was a 20-minute drive away, in the small town nearby. He left at 7 a.m., kissing Mary and Timmy goodbye. "I'll be home by 4, he said, grabbing his coffee mug. Mary waved from the porch, watching his truck disappear down the road. Timmy was still on summer break, so Mary planned to keep him busy while she unpacked more boxes. "Want to help me in the kitchen?" she asked. Timmy groaned, but followed her inside. The kitchen was old-fashioned, with yellowed linoleum floors and cabinets that creaked when opened. Mary started organizing their dishes, stacking plates and cups carefully. She found a box of old kitchenware in the pantry, left by the previous owners. There were rusty forks, a cracked teapot, and a few chipped mugs with faded flower designs. She set them aside, thinking she'd ask Linda, the real estate agent, what to do with them. Timmy sat at the table, coloring in a book about dinosaurs. "Can I go outside later?" he asked. "Sure," Mary said, "but stay away from the lake." Around noon, they drove to town for groceries. The store was small, with narrow aisles and a faint smell of cleaning products. Mary pushed the cart while Timmy trailed behind, eyeing the candy aisle. She picked up essentials: bread, milk, eggs, chicken, and a bag of apples. Timmy begged for a box of cereal with bright colors and a cartoon character on it. "Okay, but just one," Mary said, adding it to the cart. At the checkout, an older woman with gray hair rang up their items. Her name tag read Doris. She smiled at Timmy, then looked at Mary. "You're in the lake house, right?" she asked. Mary nodded, surprised. "How'd you know?" Doris shrugged. "Small town, word gets around." Her tone was friendly, but her eyes lingered on Mary a moment too long. Mary brushed it off, paid, and they left. Back home, Mary unpacked the groceries while Timmy ran outside. She watched him through the kitchen window as he kicked a soccer ball around the yard. The lake was calm, reflecting the gray clouds that had rolled in. Mary felt a chill, though the house was warm. She turned back to the kitchen, noticing a faint damp spot on the counter near the sink. It was small, like a spilled drop of water, but the counter had been dry when she started cooking. She wiped it up with a paper towel, frowning. The pipes were old. Maybe there was a leak somewhere. That afternoon, Mary cleaned the living room. She swept dust from the corners and wiped down the fireplace mantel. The brick was stained with soot, and she made a mental note to buy a scrub brush. Timmy came inside, his shoes muddy from the yard. "Timmy, take those off," Mary said, pointing to the mat by the door. He grumbled but obeyed, leaving his sneakers in a heap. As Mary vacuumed the carpet, she noticed a faint smell, like wet earth, coming from the basement stairs. She opened the door and peered down. The air was cool and damp, and the single bulb flickered when she turned it on. She decided to check it later. John got home at 4:30, looking tired but happy. "First day back was fine," he said, loosening his tie. "Kids are already asking for less homework." Mary laughed, stirring a pot of soup for dinner. They ate at the kitchen table, Timmy slurping his noodles loudly. After dinner, they played a board game in the living room. The TV signal was still fuzzy, so John promised to call the cable company tomorrow. Timmy won the game and cheered, making Mary smile. For a moment, the house felt warm and normal. But that night, Mary had a troubling dream. She was standing by the lake, barefoot in the grass. The water was dark, almost black, and perfectly still. She heard a soft splash, like something breaking the surface. When she looked down, a small pale hand reached out of the water, grabbing at the air. She stumbled back, her heart racing, but the hand sank back into the lake. Then she heard a whisper, a child's voice, faint and sad, saying, "Help me." She woke up, gasping, her hands shaking. The clock read 3:12 a.m. John was asleep, his breathing steady. The house was silent, but the sound of the lake outside seemed louder, like it was pressing against the walls. In the morning, Mary felt groggy. She didn't tell John about the dream, not wanting to worry him. They had coffee and toast for breakfast, and Timmy ate his new cereal, crunching loudly.
Can I go to the lake today? He asked.
Mary hesitated, her dream flashing in her mind. "Not yet," she said. "We need to make sure it's safe." Timmy pouted, but didn't argue. John left for work, and Mary started cleaning again, this time tackling the upstairs hallway. The wooden floor creaked under her feet, and the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Around noon, Timmy came running inside, his face pale. "Mom, I saw something weird," he said. Mary knelt down, brushing his hair back. "What was it?" Timmy pointed out the window toward the lake. There was a shadow in the water, like a person, but it was moving funny. Mary's stomach tightened. She looked out the window, but the lake was calm, with no shadows or ripples. "Maybe it was a fish," she said, trying to sound calm. "Or the clouds reflecting." Timmy didn't look convinced, but nodded and went back to his toys. Mary went to the basement to grab a mop. The damp smell was stronger now, and she noticed a small puddle near the window. It hadn't rained in days. She wiped it up, her hands trembling slightly. The window was grimy, but she could see the lake outside, its surface still and dark. She felt a sudden urge to lock the basement door, but shook it off. It was just an old house, she told herself. Old houses had leaks and strange noises. That evening, John came home with a pizza, and they ate in the living room, laughing as Timmy told them about his dinosaur drawings. But as they cleaned up, Mary noticed another wet spot on the kitchen floor, near the back door that led to the yard. It was small, shaped like a child's footprint. She stared at it, her heart pounding. When she called John to look, the spot was gone, like it had evaporated. "You okay?" John asked, noticing her expression. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." As they went to bed, Mary checked on Timmy. He was asleep, his action figures scattered on the floor. She closed his window even though it was warm. The lake was dark outside, its surface gleaming under the moonlight. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from the water. The second week in the lake house began much like the first. John, Mary, and Timmy were settling into a rhythm, though the house still felt like a work in progress. Boxes were still stacked in corners, and the walls needed painting. Mary woke up each morning feeling tired, her dream about the lake lingering like a bad taste. She hadn't told John about it, or about the wet footprint she thought she saw. She didn't want to sound crazy. Besides, John was busy with work, and Timmy seemed happy playing in the yard. She pushed her worries aside and focused on making the house a home. On Tuesday, John decided to tackle some repairs. The back door, which led to the yard and the lake, stuck when opened, scraping against the frame. He spent the morning sanding it down, his hands covered in sawdust. The air was warm and sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked. Timmy sat nearby, building a fort out of sticks and an old blanket. "Can you make me a treehouse next?" he asked, his eyes bright. John chuckled. "One thing at a time, buddy. This door's giving me enough trouble." Timmy shrugged and went back to his fort, humming a tune. Mary was upstairs organizing the linen closet. The shelves were dusty, and she found more items left by the previous owners. A stack of faded towels, a rusted sewing kit, and a small wooden box with a broken lock. Inside the box was a child's hair clip shaped like a butterfly. It was tarnished but delicate, and Mary wondered who it belonged to. She set it aside, planning to ask Linda, the real estate agent, about the house's history. As she folded sheets, she heard a faint creak from Timmy's room. She paused, listening. The house was old and creaks were normal, but this sounded like footsteps, small and light. She walked to Timmy's room, but it was empty. His toys were scattered on the floor and the window was closed. She shook her head, telling herself she was imagining things. That afternoon, Mary decided to clean the basement. The damp smell was getting worse, and she wanted to check for mold. She took a flashlight and a bucket of cleaning supplies downstairs. The single bulb flickered as she flipped the switch, casting shadows on the concrete walls. The small window near the ceiling was still grimy, letting in only a faint glow. She noticed another puddle near it, larger than before, about the size of a dinner plate. It hadn't rained all week. She mopped it up, her heart beating faster. The water felt cold, almost icy, under her fingers. She scrubbed the window with a rag, but the dirt seemed stuck, like it was part of the glass. Through the smudges, she could see the lake, its surface still and dark under the cloudy sky. Back upstairs, Mary made lunch, peanut butter sandwiches for her and Timmy. John joined them, wiping sawdust off his hands. "Door's fixed," he said proudly. "Should open smoothly now." Mary nodded, but her mind was on the basement. She didn't mention the puddle. Instead, she asked, "Did you ever notice how damp it is down there?" John shrugged. "Old houses. Probably just needs better ventilation. I'll look at it this weekend." Timmy, munching his sandwich, asked if they could go fishing in the lake soon. Mary tensed but said, "We'll see, sweetie." After lunch, Timmy went back outside. Mary watched him through the kitchen window, her eyes drifting to the lake. It looked normal in the daylight, but she couldn't shake the image from her dream, the pale hand reaching out of the water. She busied herself with cleaning the kitchen, scrubbing the counters, and sweeping the floor. As she worked, she heard a faint tapping sound, like water dripping. She checked the sink, but it was dry. The sound seemed to come from the walls, soft and irregular. She followed it to the hallway where it stopped. The house was quiet again, but her skin prickled. That evening, John grilled burgers in the yard. The smell of charcoal filled the air, and Timmy ran around chasing fireflies as the sun set. Mary brought out plates and a bowl of salad, trying to focus on the normalcy of the moment. They ate on the porch, the lake shimmering in the fading light. Timmy talked about his fort, saying he wanted to sleep in it one night. "Not yet," Mary said quickly. "It's safer inside." John raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He seemed relaxed, unaware of the unease growing in Mary's chest. As they cleaned up, Mary noticed the back door was slightly ajar. She was sure John had closed it after fixing it. She pushed it shut, hearing the latch click. When she turned around, she froze. On the kitchen floor near the table was a small wet footprint, clear as day. It was child-sized with distinct toes, like someone had walked in from the lake. Her breath caught. She called John, but when he came, the footprint was gone, the floor dry. "You sure you saw something?" he asked, frowning. Mary nodded, her voice shaky. "It was right there." John hugged her. "You're just tired. This place is new. It's easy to get spooked." That night, Timmy woke up screaming. Mary and John rushed to his room, finding him sitting up in bed, his face pale. "What's wrong?" Mary asked, holding him close. Timmy's eyes were wide. "I heard someone whispering my name," he said. "It came from the window." Mary looked at the window, which was still closed. The lake was dark outside, its surface reflecting the moon. "It was probably a dream," John said, rubbing Timmy's back. But Timmy shook his head. "It was real. It sounded like a kid." Mary's stomach twisted, remembering her own dream. She stayed with Timmy until he fell back asleep, her hand stroking his hair. In the morning, Mary felt drained. She made breakfast, pancakes this time to cheer Timmy up. He seemed fine, eating happily and talking about his fort again. John left for work, promising to call the cable company about the TV signal. Mary decided to keep Timmy inside today. She set up a puzzle in the living room and they worked on it together, piecing together a picture of a forest. But as they worked, Mary heard the tapping sound again, faint and steady, like water dripping somewhere in the house. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, and even the basement, but found nothing. The sound stopped when she listened closely, like it was hiding. Around noon, Mary called Linda, the real estate agent, to ask about the old items in the house. Linda's voice was cheerful but vague. "Oh, the previous owners left some things behind. Just odds and ends. Keep what you want or toss them." Mary mentioned the butterfly hair clip. There was a pause. "That's interesting," Linda said. "I don't know much about the family that lived there before the elderly couple. I can check the records if you want." Mary said yes, feeling a knot in her chest. She didn't mention the puddles or the footprint. That afternoon, Timmy drew pictures at the kitchen table while Mary vacuumed upstairs. As she passed his room, she noticed his window was open, just a crack. She was sure she'd closed it last night. She shut it firmly, locking it, and checked the other windows in the house. All were secure. When she went back downstairs, Timmy held up his drawing, a picture of the lake with a dark shape in the water. "What's that?" Mary asked, her voice tight. Timmy shrugged. "The shadow I saw yesterday. It looked like a person." Mary forced a smile, but her hands were cold. As evening approached, John came home with a new light bulb for the basement, hoping to fix the flickering. He went downstairs and Mary heard him muttering about the damp smell. When he came back up, he said, "Found another puddle down there. Weird since it's not raining. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." Mary nodded, her throat tight. She didn't tell him about Timmy's drawing or the open window. That night, as they went to bed, Mary couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the lake's soft waves. Around midnight, she heard it again, the faint sound of a child crying, coming from outside. She got up and looked out the bedroom window. The lake was still, but in the moonlight, she thought she saw a ripple, like something had moved just below the surface. She closed the curtains and got back into bed, her heart racing. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. The third week in the lake house brought a mix of routine and growing unease for the Smith family. John was busy with his teaching job, leaving early each morning and returning tired but cheerful. Mary kept herself occupied with unpacking and cleaning, trying to make the house feel like home. Timmy, still on summer break, spent his days playing in the yard or drawing at the kitchen table. But the strange occurrences, the wet footprints, the whispers, the puddles, were weighing on Mary. She hadn't told John about Timmy's claim of hearing a voice or the open window in his room. She didn't want to scare him or admit she was starting to believe something was wrong. On Wednesday morning, a plumber arrived to check the basement. John had called him the day before, concerned about the dampness and puddles. The plumber, a middle-aged man named Carl with a gray beard, arrived in a rusty van. Mary showed him to the basement where the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. Carl inspected the pipes, running his hands along the walls and tapping the concrete floor. "No leaks I can see," he said, scratching his head. He pointed to the small window near the ceiling. "This is sealed tight, no water coming in from outside." "You sure you saw puddles?" Mary nodded, her throat tight. "They were here," she said, pointing to the spot near the window. The floor was dry now. Carl shrugged. "Could be condensation. Old houses get like that. Keep an eye on it." He left without charging them, saying there was nothing to fix. After Carl left, Mary felt frustrated. The puddles weren't her imagination, and neither was the footprint. She decided to call Linda, the real estate agent, again. This time, she asked directly about the house's history. "Who lived here before the elderly couple?" she said, holding the phone tightly. Linda's voice was hesitant. "I'd have to check the records. It's an old place, you know. Lots of families over the years." Mary pressed her. "What about a child? Did a family with kids live here?" There was a long pause. "I'll look into it and get back to you," Linda said, her tone clipped. Mary hung up, feeling a chill. She glanced at the lake through the kitchen window. It was calm, but the water looked darker today, like it was hiding something. Mary tried to focus on her tasks. She spent the morning sorting through clothes, folding Timmy's shirts and stacking them in his dresser. The butterfly hair clip she'd found was still on the shelf in the linen closet. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It felt heavier than it should, and the metal was cold. She wondered if it belonged to a girl who lived here long ago. The thought made her stomach twist, but she put the clip back and closed the closet door. Timmy was in the living room, playing with his action figures. He'd built a small fort out of pillows and a blanket, pretending it was a castle. Mary watched him, trying to smile. "Having fun?" she asked. Timmy nodded, but his expression was serious.
Mom, can I tell you something?
He said, his voice low. Mary knelt beside him. Of course, sweetie. Timmy looked at his toys, avoiding her eyes. I saw the shadow again, in the lake. It was closer this time, like it was looking at me. Mary's heart skipped a beat. When was this? She asked. Yesterday when I was outside, he said. It didn't move like a fish, it was standing. Mary hugged him, her hands trembling. It's okay, she said. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. But she didn't believe her own words. That afternoon, Mary decided to research the house herself. She used her laptop sitting at the kitchen table while Timmy colored nearby. She searched for the address online, hoping to find old records or news articles. The internet connection was slow, and most of her searches turned up nothing. But one article caught her eye, a brief mention from 1972 about a drowning in the lake. It didn't give details, just that a local tragedy had occurred near the property. The article was short, and the newspaper's archives weren't fully digitized. Mary wrote down the name of the paper and planned to visit the town library later. John came home around 4:30, carrying a bag of takeout from a diner in town. They ate fried chicken and mashed potatoes at the kitchen table, Timmy dipping his fries in ketchup. John talked about his day, saying one of his students had fallen asleep in class. Mary laughed, but her mind was elsewhere. She didn't mention her research or Timmy's story about the shadow. After dinner, they watched a movie on their laptop, since the TV signal was still bad. Timmy fell asleep halfway through, curled up on the couch. John carried him to bed, and Mary tucked him in, checking his window again. It was locked, but she felt a draft, like cold air seeping through the glass. That night, Mary had another dream. She was in the basement, standing in the dark. The bulb overhead flickered, casting long shadows. She heard water dripping, slow and steady, and saw a puddle forming at her feet. It grew, spreading across the floor, cold and black. Then she saw her, a small figure at the edge of the room, dripping wet. It was a girl, maybe 7 or 8, with pale skin and dark hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were empty, like holes, and she whispered, "You didn't help me." Mary tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come. The girl stepped closer, leaving wet footprints, and reached out with a cold, wet hand. Mary woke up, her heart pounding, the room dark. The clock said 2:58 a.m. She didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, Mary felt like she was moving through fog. She made breakfast, cereal for Timmy, toast for her and John. Timmy seemed quieter than usual, eating slowly. "You okay?" Mary asked. He nodded but didn't meet her eyes. John left for work, promising to stop by the hardware store for paint samples. Mary decided to take Timmy to the town library to look for more information about the house. The library was small, with dusty shelves and a single librarian, an older woman named Margaret. Mary asked about old newspapers, mentioning the 1972 article. Margaret frowned. "That was a sad time," she said. "I can pull the records, but they're in storage. Come back tomorrow." Mary thanked her, feeling a mix of hope and dread. Back home, Mary kept Timmy busy with a board game. They played on the living room floor, the pieces clicking softly. As they played, Mary heard a faint thump from upstairs, like something falling. She froze, listening. The house was quiet again. "Stay here," she told Timmy, and went to check. In her and John's bedroom, she found the butterfly hair clip on the floor, far from the closet where she'd left it. She picked it up, her hands shaking. It was cold, like it had been in a freezer. She put it in a drawer, locking it, and went back downstairs. That evening, John painted a sample patch of blue on the living room wall, testing the color. Timmy helped, getting paint on his hands and laughing. Mary tried to join in, but her mind was on the hair clip and the dream. After dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The lake was still, its surface like a mirror. Timmy pointed at it. "There's the shadow again," he said, his voice small. Mary and John looked but saw nothing. "It's gone now," Timmy said, looking down. Mary hugged him, her heart racing. As they went to bed, Mary checked every window in the house. They were all locked, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Around midnight, she heard the tapping again, like water dripping, but this time it was louder, coming from the kitchen. She got up, grabbing a flashlight. The kitchen was dark and the sink was dry. But on the counter, near the sink, was the butterfly hair clip, its wings glinting in the flashlight's beam. She was sure she'd locked it in the drawer. Her hands shook as she picked it up, and it felt wet. like it had been pulled from the lake. She dropped it, backing away, and ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. The fourth week in the lake house felt heavier for the Smith family. Mary's sleep was broken by nightmares, and Timmy's quiet moments hinted at a fear he wasn't fully sharing. John, still unaware of the extent of their unease, focused on making the house livable, painting walls and fixing small issues. The strange events, the wet footprints, the moving hair clip, the whispers, were piling up, and Mary could no longer dismiss them as her imagination. She was determined to find answers, even if it meant facing something she wasn't ready for. On Thursday morning, Mary took Timmy to the town library to follow up on the newspaper records. The library was quiet, with only a few people browsing the shelves. Margaret, the librarian, greeted them with a nod. "I found those articles you asked about," she said, leading Mary to a small table in the back. She handed over a folder of yellowed newspaper clippings. "Be careful with these. They're old." Mary thanked her and sat down with Timmy, who was flipping through a picture book about animals. The articles were from 1972, detailing a drowning in the lake. A 7-year-old girl named Emily Carter had gone missing during a summer picnic. Her family lived in the house the Smiths now occupied. The article described how Emily wandered off while her parents were distracted. Her body was found the next day, tangled in the reeds by the lake's edge. The family moved away soon after, unable to stay in the house. There was a grainy photo of Emily, a small girl with dark hair and a shy smile, wearing a butterfly hair clip. Mary's breath caught. It was the same clip she'd found. She closed the folder, her hands trembling, and told Timmy it was time to go. He didn't argue, sensing her tension. Back home, Mary hid the folder in her bedroom drawer, next to the hair clip she'd locked away. She didn't want John or Timmy to see it yet. Her mind raced with questions. Was Emily the shadow Timmy saw? The girl in her dreams? She wanted to tell John everything, but he'd been so practical, dismissing her fears as stress. She decided to wait until she had more proof. For now, she kept Timmy close, not letting him play outside alone. The lake, once a peaceful backdrop, now felt like a threat lurking just beyond the yard. John spent the day painting the living room, the blue color brightening the space. Timmy helped, holding the paint can and chattering about school starting soon. Mary tried to join in, but her thoughts were on Emily. She made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, and they ate at the kitchen table. Timmy was quieter than usual, pushing his food around his plate. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Mary asked. He shrugged, looking at the floor. "I don't like the lake anymore," he said. "It feels bad." Mary's heart sank. She hugged him, promising they'd stay away from it. That afternoon, Mary cleaned the upstairs bathroom, scrubbing the tiles and organizing the medicine cabinet. As she worked, she heard a faint giggle like a child's laugh coming from the hallway. She froze, the sponge dripping in her hand. "Timmy?" she called, but he was downstairs, watching cartoons on the laptop. She stepped into the hallway, her pulse racing. It was empty, but the air felt cold, like a draft from an open window. She checked Timmy's room. His window was locked, but the butterfly hair clip was on his bed, gleaming in the sunlight. She'd locked it in the drawer that morning. Her hands shook as she picked it up, its metal icy against her skin. She put it back in the drawer, double-checking the lock. John came home with takeout pizza, and they ate in the living room, the fresh paint smell lingering. Timmy seemed more cheerful, talking about his favorite cartoon. John noticed Mary's distraction and asked, "You okay?" "You've been quiet," she forced a smile. "Just tired. Lots to do." She didn't mention the hair clip or the library. After dinner they played cards, but Mary's eyes kept drifting to the windows. The lake was dark, its surface still under the evening sky. That night, Timmy had a nightmare. Mary and John woke to his cries and found him thrashing in bed. "She was here," he sobbed, clinging to Mary. "Who?" John asked, his voice sharp. Timmy's eyes were wide with fear. "The girl in the water. She was at my window looking in." Mary's stomach dropped. She checked the window, locked, no marks or smudges. "It was a bad dream," she said, but her voice wavered. She stayed with Timmy until he calmed down, his small body trembling in her arms. The next morning, Mary felt exhausted. She made breakfast, oatmeal for Timmy, coffee for her and John. John mentioned he'd take a look at the basement again, still puzzled by the dampness. "Maybe we need a dehumidifier," he said. Mary nodded, barely listening. After John left for work, she called Linda again. "Did you find anything about the house?" she asked. Linda sounded nervous. "I checked the records. A family named Carter lived there in the early 70s. They had a daughter who passed away. That's all I know." Mary pressed for more, but Linda said she'd have to dig deeper and promised to call back. Mary spent the day keeping Timmy inside, setting up puzzles and board games. The house felt oppressive, the air heavy despite the open windows. Around noon, she heard the tapping sound again, like water dripping, coming from the basement. She told Timmy to stay put and went downstairs. The bulb flickered, casting shadows. A new puddle was near the window, larger than before, and it shimmered oddly, like it was moving. She stepped closer, her flashlight shaking, and saw something in the water, a reflection, faint but clear. It was a girl's face, pale and hollow-eyed, staring up at her. Mary gasped, stumbling back. When she looked again, the puddle was just water, no reflection. She mopped it up, her heart pounding, and locked the basement door. That evening, John came home with paint for the kitchen, green, like they'd discussed. He started painting, humming to himself while Timmy drew at the table. Mary watched them, trying to hold on to the normalcy, but her mind was on the face in the puddle. She didn't tell John. She was afraid he'd think she was losing it. After dinner, they sat on the porch, the lake gleaming under the moonlight. Timmy stayed close to Mary, avoiding the yard. "Can we move back to the city?" he whispered. Mary hugged him, her throat tight. "We'll figure this out," she said, but she wasn't sure how. As they went to bed, Mary checked every door and window. The house was secure, but the air felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. Around 1 a.m., she woke to a sound, not tapping, but a soft, wet thud, like something heavy hitting the floor. It came from the kitchen. She grabbed the flashlight and crept downstairs. John still asleep. The kitchen was dark, the air cold. On the floor near the back door was a trail of wet footprints, small and child-sized, leading from the door to the basement stairs. They glistened in the flashlight's beam, fresh and dripping. Mary's heart raced. She followed them to the basement door, which was unlocked, slightly ajar. She was sure she'd locked it. Trembling, she opened the door and shone the light down. At the bottom of the stairs, in the dim glow, stood a small figure, dripping wet, her dark hair clinging to her pale face. She looked up at Mary, her eyes black and empty, and whispered, "Why didn't you help me?" Mary screamed, dropping the flashlight, and slammed the door shut, locking it. She ran back to the bedroom, locking herself in with John. The 5th week in the lake house was unbearable for Mary. Her encounter with the ghostly figure in the basement had shattered her ability to dismiss the strange events. The wet footprints, the moving hair clip, Timmy's nightmares, and the truth about Emily Carter's drowning all pointed to something real and wrong in the house. Mary hadn't told John about the figure. She was terrified he'd think she was crazy, but she couldn't keep it from him much longer. Timmy was scared, refusing to leave her side, and even John was starting to notice the tension. The house, once a dream, now felt like a trap. On Friday morning, Mary woke up exhausted, her eyes heavy from another sleepless night. She'd stayed up, listening for the tapping or crying sounds, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. John was already in the kitchen making coffee, while Timmy sat at the table, picking at his cereal. "You look rough," John said, handing her a mug. Mary forced a smile. "Didn't sleep well," she said, avoiding his eyes. She wanted to tell him everything, the articles, the hair clip, the ghost, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she asked, "Can you stay home today?" "I need to talk." John frowned but nodded. "I'll call in sick." "What's going on?" Mary glanced at Timmy, who was watching them. "Later," she said softly. After breakfast, Mary took Timmy to the living room to color, keeping him close. John went to the basement to check the dehumidifier he'd bought, hoping it would fix the damp smell. When he came back up, his face was pale. "There's water down there again," he said. "Not a puddle, a lot of it, like a flood." "The dehumidifier's off and the floor's soaked." Mary's heart sank. "Did you see anything else?" she asked, her voice trembling. John shook his head, confused. "Like what?" She took a deep breath and led him to their bedroom, closing the door so Timmy wouldn't hear. Mary pulled the folder of newspaper clippings from the drawer and showed him the article about Emily Carter. "This girl drowned in the lake in 1972, she said. "She lived in this house. I found her hair clip in the closet. She opened the drawer, but the butterfly hair clip was gone. Her stomach dropped. It was here, she said, her voice rising. John put a hand on her shoulder. Mary, calm down. You're stressed. Maybe you misplaced it. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. It keeps moving, John. I lock it away and it shows up again. Timmy's been seeing things in the lake, hearing whispers. I saw her last night, in the basement.
A girl dripping wet saying we didn't help her.
John stared at her, his face torn between concern and disbelief. You saw what? Before she could answer, Timmy screamed from the living room. They ran to him, finding him curled up on the couch, pointing at the window. She's out there, he cried. Mary looked out, her heart pounding. The lake was still, but near the shore, she saw a ripple, then a small figure standing in the water, her dark hair wet and clinging to her pale face. It was Emily, her eyes black and empty, staring at the house. Mary gasped, grabbing Timmy. John looked out, his face paling. What the hell is that? He whispered, seeing the figure too. The girl didn't move, just stood there, the water lapping at her knees. Mary pulled Timmy away from the window, her hands shaking. We need to leave, she said. John nodded, his practicality crumbling. Pack a bag. We'll stay in town tonight. They rushed upstairs, grabbing clothes and essentials. Mary checked Timmy's room, her heart racing as she saw the butterfly hair clip on his pillow, wet and gleaming. She left it there, not wanting to touch it. As they packed, the house felt colder, the air thick with the smell of lake water. The tapping sound started again, louder, coming from all around, like rain on the roof. But the sky was clear. They loaded the car, Timmy clinging to Mary's hand. As John started the engine, Mary looked back at the house. The front door was open, though she was sure they'd locked it. In the doorway stood Emily, her small figure dripping, her eyes fixed on them. Mary screamed and John hit the gas, the car speeding down the gravel driveway. They didn't stop until they reached a motel in town, checking in with shaking hands. Timmy cried quietly, and Mary held him, whispering that they were safe now. That night in the motel, Mary finally told John everything, the dreams, the footprints, the face in the puddle. He listened, his face grim. I saw her too, he admitted. I didn't want to believe it, but something's wrong with that house. They decided to contact Linda in the morning to discuss selling the house. Mary didn't care about the money, they couldn't go back. Timmy slept between them, his small body warm and safe. The next day, Linda met them at a diner in town. Her face was pale and she avoided their eyes. I found more about the Carters, she said. After Emily drowned, her parents said strange things happened in the house, wet footprints, whispers, objects moving. They thought it was her trying to reach them. They left within a month. Mary's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell us? Linda looked down. I didn't think it was real. Just stories. John clenched his fists. We're done with that house, he said. We're not going back. They stayed in the motel for a week, looking for a new place to live. Mary called a local priest, who agreed to visit the house and perform a blessing. She didn't know if it would help, but she needed something to ease her fear. The priest, Father Michael, went to the house with them on Wednesday. The air inside was heavy, the smell of lake water overwhelming. The basement floor was still wet, though the dehumidifier was running. Father Michael sprinkled holy water and said prayers, his voice steady but tense. As he prayed, the tapping sound grew louder, then stopped abruptly. The house felt quieter, but Mary wasn't sure if it was truly over. They never returned to live in the house. John arranged to sell it through Linda, who found a buyer willing to take it as is. The new owners, a young couple with no children, didn't believe in ghosts. Mary hoped they'd be okay, but didn't ask questions. The Smiths moved to a small apartment in town, far from any lakes. Timmy started school, slowly returning to his cheerful self, though he never talked about the lake house. Mary threw away the folder of articles, wanting to forget Emily's face. John painted their new place green, like they'd planned for the kitchen, and they tried to rebuild their routine. But sometimes, at night, Mary woke to the sound of water lapping, faint and distant, like a memory she couldn't shake. She'd check on Timmy, finding him asleep, safe. The house was gone, but the lake's whisper lingered in her dreams, a reminder of the girl who never found peace.